There is a neuroscientist at Carleton University who has spent 3 decades studying one of the most universal human experiences. His name is Dr. Timothy Pychyl. And after all that research, all those studies, all those years, he arrived at a conclusion that overturns almost everything we think we know. Procrastination is not about time. It is not about laziness. It is not about discipline. It is not about motivation. It is about something older, something buried so deep in your biology that you cannot simply decide your way out of it. And here is the detail that changes everything. In 1970, roughly 4 out of every 100 adults struggled with chronic procrastination. Today, that number is closer to 20. Something happened, something changed, and it was not us. To understand what is really happening when you open your phone instead of starting that task, you need to understand a war, not a metaphor. A literal neurological war. One that has been waged inside the human skull for millions of years. On one side, the limbic system, ancient, emotional, fast. This is the part of the brain that kept our ancestors alive. It does not plan. It does not think in quarters or deadlines. It responds to one thing only. How does this feel, right now, in this moment? On the other side, the prefrontal cortex, newer, rational, slower. This is where your goals live, your intentions, your understanding that the task due Friday matters more than the video you are currently watching. Here is the problem. The limbic system is not just faster, it is structurally dominant. When a task triggers even mild discomfort, boredom, anxiety, self-doubt, the vague dread of beginning something hard, the emotional brain fires first. It floods your system before the rational brain has time to respond. And in that gap, that few seconds between the discomfort signal and the logical response, you open another tab. You are not being weak. Your brain was doing exactly what it was designed to do. The stakes here are real. Research shows chronic procrastination is now linked to cardiovascular disease, hypertension, anxiety, depression, and significant financial loss. 40% of people have reported losing money directly because of delayed decisions. This is not a productivity problem. This is a health problem. Everything seemed manageable when procrastination affected a small fraction of the population, until the last 5 decades changed the equation completely. Here is what the official conversation about procrastination almost never mentions. For most of human history, this brain battle had a natural rhythm. The limbic system craved immediate reward. The prefrontal cortex pushed toward longer-term planning. And most of the time, the environment around people was not actively engineering one side to win. The tasks our ancestors faced, finding food, building shelter, maintaining community, had immediate, tangible sensory feedback. The cost of avoidance was visible and physical. Today, the cost of avoidance is invisible and delayed, and the rewards for avoidance are immediate, engineered, and infinite. Consider what Dr. Pychyl describes as the future self as stranger effect. Neuroimaging research has shown something extraordinary. When people think about their future self, the person who will actually face the consequences of today's delay, their brain activates in patterns identical to how it processes a stranger. Not themselves, someone else entirely. We will do things to our future selves that we would never do to a person we love. We will leave them with impossible deadlines, with unfinished conversations, with the weight of every moment we chose comfort over progress. And we do not feel guilty, because that person to our brain is not us yet. This is not a flaw in willpower. This is the architecture of consciousness itself. But here is where the story takes a darker turn, because someone, or something, noticed this gap between who we are now and who we will be, and they built an entire industry around it. In 1971, 4% of the population procrastinated chronically. By the time researchers revisited this data decades later, the number had not doubled, it had not tripled, it had quadrupled. Some estimates now place it between 15 and 20% of all adults worldwide. Ask yourself this: if procrastination was simply a character flaw, a personal failure of discipline, why would it track so precisely with the rise of the attention economy? The data tells a completely different story. Every app on your phone, every platform designed to capture your focus, was engineered by teams of behavioral scientists using the same neurological vulnerability that Dr. Pychyl spent his career studying. The limbic system's craving for immediate reward, the prefrontal cortex's inability to compete when the emotional signal arrives first. Variable reward schedules, the same mechanism that makes slot machines so difficult to put down, are built into social media notifications. Infinite scroll removes the natural stopping point your brain needs to re-engage its rational planning center. Autoplay eliminates the moment of decision that might allow your prefrontal cortex to intervene. The modern environment was not designed with your goals in mind. It was designed with your attention in mind. Stay with me, because what comes next is the part that nobody talks about. The procrastination cycle has a second layer, one that makes everything worse. And it comes from the one thing we instinctively reach for after we have already delayed: self-criticism. Research led by Dr. Michael Wall at Carleton University discovered something counterintuitive. The harsher you judge yourself after procrastinating, the more likely you are to procrastinate again on the next task. Guilt and shame do not motivate. They reinforce the emotional avoidance cycle. The person who beats themselves up after opening YouTube instead of working has now made both the original task and the act of confronting their own behavior feel aversive. The limbic system now has two things to avoid. This is not weakness, this is neuroscience. The world was told procrastination is a time management problem. The reality is that it is an emotional regulation problem that occurs inside a biological system now under unprecedented external pressure. Here is the complete picture. Your brain has an ancient system that prioritizes immediate emotional comfort over delayed reward. This system was adaptive. It kept humans alive. It was never designed for open-plan officers, 47 unread emails, and a device in your pocket offering 10,000 forms of instant pleasure at any moment. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of your goals, your values, your sense of future, is the newer, weaker part of this architecture. It is not defective, it is simply outmatched in an environment it was never built for. And here is the deepest layer. For decades, the psychological and cultural response to procrastination was shame. Push harder, try harder, be better, as if willpower alone could overwrite millions of years of neurological evolution. What the actual research shows is precisely the opposite. Self-compassion, not self-criticism, is what allows the prefrontal cortex to re-engage. When you forgive yourself for delaying, the emotional threat signal reduces, the amygdala quiets, and the rational planning brain finally has the conditions it needs to function. The people who consistently follow through on their intentions are not the ones with the most discipline. They are the ones who learn to work with their biology rather than against it. We want to feel good now, Pychyl wrote, and the tragedy is that in choosing short-term emotional comfort, we sacrifice the deeper, harder happiness that comes from becoming who we want to be. For 50 years, we blamed individuals for a systemic problem, not by accident. This is not just history. Look at what is happening right now. The average person in 2026 is spending more hours per day in contact with algorithmically optimized content than any generation before them. The tools designed to capture limbic attention have become more sophisticated every year. The distance between where you are and where you want to be has never been easier to not close. And we are still calling it laziness. What the research asks you to understand is this: your procrastination is not evidence of who you are. It is evidence of the gap between an ancient brain and a modern world, and the intentional exploitation of that gap by systems built to profit from your delay. The practical takeaway is not another time management system. It is this: notice the emotion before you notice the behavior. When you feel the pull to avoid, name what you are feeling: boredom, anxiety, self-doubt. The moment you name it, the prefrontal cortex begins to re-engage. The amygdala loses its grip. Most people will never connect these dots. They will continue to treat symptoms, deadlines missed, goals deferred, evenings lost, without ever asking what is actually generating them. Now you can. In 1970, it was 4 out of 100. Today, it may be closer to 20. Not because people changed, but because the architecture around people changed, and no one told them what was happening inside their own heads. If this story deserved to be told, help us find the next one. There are patterns hidden in plain sight everywhere. Next time, we go deeper into the psychology of self-sabotage. Why the people most capable of success are often the ones most determined to prevent it. The truth is stranger than you think.